We all make decisions. Tons of them, every single day. Most are easy, right? What to have for breakfast, that kind of thing. But what about those other decisions, the big ones, where the best thing for you to do depends entirely on what someone else is about to do? Well, that's where we're going today. Welcome to the world of game theory. Just think about it for a second. You're negotiating a salary, or maybe you're bidding in an auction, or you're trying to price a new product. In all those moments, you're not just thinking about what you want. You're trying to get inside the other person's head. That right there is a strategic interaction, and game theory is kind of like the map for navigating it. And this is the absolute key to everything. Your outcome is tied to their outcome. You're linked. And that interdependence is what turns a simple choice into a fascinating strategic puzzle. You can't just go it alone. You have to anticipate, predict, and react. Okay, so this all sounds a little abstract, right? Let's make it real. We're going to break down a classic strategic game that happens every single day in markets all over the world. So picture this. Two vendors in a bustling market. They're selling the exact same stuff side by side. Every morning, they face the same exact question. Do I set my prices high and make a bigger profit on each sale, or do I go low and try to grab more customers from my rival? The catch, of course, is that the right answer completely depends on what the other person does. So this grid you're looking at, it's called a payoff matrix. It's basically a map of every possible outcome. The numbers are their daily profits in thousands of local CFA francs. So if both vendors choose a high price, look, they both do pretty well. They each get 80,000. But what happens if vendor A goes high, but vendor B goes low? Whoa! Vendor B cleans up, making 100,000, and leaving poor vendor A with just 30,000. And if they both go low? Well, they get into a price war, and they're both worse off, stuck at 50,000 each. Okay, so if we're going to use this map to find the best move, we've got to get the language right. We need to know the basic building blocks of any game like this. First up, pretty simple, you have the players. These are just the decision makers. It could be giant companies, you and your boss. Or in our little story, it's just vendor A and vendor B. Next, every player has strategies. And that's just a fancy way of saying a complete plan for what you're going to do. For our vendors, it's super simple. Their strategy is the choice they make. Commit to a high price or a low price. And finally, we have the payoffs. Those are the numbers in the grid, the outcomes. And notice how a vendor's profit doesn't just depend on their own choice, right? It depends on what their competitor chooses too. That mutual dependency, well, that is the game. Now, quick aside here. We're using this matrix because our vendors are choosing their prices at the same time without knowing what the other is doing. But for games where you take turns, like in chess, you'd use something called a game tree to map out all the possible moves and counter moves. Two ways to map the same kind of thinking. All right, now we get to the fun part. We have the map, we know the rules. So how do we actually find the best possible move? How should our vendors decide what to do? This is really the ultimate question for any strategist, isn't it? Is there one move, a single, unbeatable choice, that's the best for you no matter what the other guy does? Well, in game theory, there's a name for that. It's called a dominant strategy. And let me tell you, this is like the holy grail of strategic thinking. If you can find one, the game suddenly becomes incredibly simple. You don't have to outguess your rival because your best move is always the same one. And the flip side of that is a dominated strategy. This is the move you should absolutely never, ever make. Why? Because you have another option that is always better no matter what anyone else does. So the first thing any strategist does is look for these and just cross them right off the list. Okay, let's find it. Let's find the dominant strategy right here in our game. Put yourself in vendor A's shoes for a second. Let's say vendor B chooses high price. What should you do? Well, you can go high and get 80, or you can go low and get 100. Obviously, 100 is better. Okay, now let's say vendor B chooses low price. Should you go high for 30 or low for 50? Well, again, 50 is better. Did you see that? It doesn't matter what vendor B does, vendor A is always better off choosing a low price. That is their dominant strategy. And since the game is perfectly symmetrical, vendor B has the exact same logic. Their dominant strategy is also low price. So they both choose low. And here's the crazy part. They each end up with only 50,000 when they could have both walked away with 80,000 if they just found a way to cooperate. And this little story isn't just about two vendors at a market stall. It actually gets at a really fundamental truth about business and competition. The moment you have just a few major players, your success is completely tangled up with theirs. And this is exactly why thinking like a game theorist is such a superpower in business. It gives you a whole toolkit to model these competitive situations, everything from the price wars between giant telecom companies to two tech startups racing to develop the same product. It lets you predict what's likely to happen, and most importantly, helps you design smarter strategies from the get-go. But there is a huge assumption hiding under the surface of all of this. All these clever predictions, they only work if we assume that every single player in the game is acting perfectly, logically, and rationally. Now, assuming everyone is basically a rational robot trying to maximize their score, it gives us a really powerful starting point, a baseline for predicting what people will do. But let's be honest, it's a simplification. Real people aren't always logical. We have emotions, we have weird biases, and we definitely make mistakes. Now, that's where fields like behavioral economics come in to explore that messy reality. But the rational model, it's still the essential first step for any serious strategic analysis. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Understanding the rules of the game is absolutely the first step. But the real masters of strategy, they don't just play the game they're handed. They figure out how to change the rules themselves. They invent a whole new game, one they're built to win from the start.